I hope you're doing well, because I have been. We're about to get into some hard hitters. I hope you're ready. Let's get into the first one. This is going to be in the traditions of the Dakota, okay, by William Pigeon, all right? First things first, what are we going to jumping off of? Traits of ancient nations in the old world are everywhere, seen in the fragments of dilapidated cities, pyramids of stone, and walls of immense length. But here, in North America, is found the wreck of empires, whose ending, it would seem, is older than the beginning of pyramids, and whose history may only be read in the imperishable relics of tumuli and such great records. Now, let's continue a little more because what I find interesting in this aspect is that I do know of somebody that speaks of Alexander the Great being here in America with a bunch of relics. We may be permitted, we're right here, y'all. We may be permitted, however, to presume that a literal or hieroglyphical record was once used by the Greeks and Romans, more definite than any known to us, that was buried in the flames kindled by the Goths and Vandals, who overran the Roman Empire, destroying their accounts of discoveries and history of antiquities, and casting over the regions they subdued the gloom of barbarous ignorance, congenial with the shades of the forest whence they originated. Now, this presumption is predicated on the fact that mankind have, from the earliest eras known in history, continued to keep a record of events either literally, hieroglyphically, or through tradition in every age of the world. And we avert to Greece and Rome, not only because they were the most enlightened nations of their age, but because a national amalgamation calculated to concentrate the knowledge and science of both nations actually existed. So here's where we kind of pick up on some more tidbits that are kind of hard hitting. Alexander the Great was a Grecian and flourished about 300 years before the supposed Christ. The origin of his nation is said to have been Japetus, who descended from Japhet, the third son of Noah. Now, let it be observed that the Macedonian kingdom, of which Alexander was not only the last but the greatest monarch, commenced about 814 years before Christ, which was 61 years earlier than the Romans. Consequently, the annals of this nation must necessarily have run back to the flood and may have reached beyond, but revolution after revolution has left the world to discover over again many arts and sciences familiarly known to them. And we are among those that believe that North and South America were not only known to the Romans and Grecians, but were firmly taken possession of and colonized by them. Nor is this opinion founded in mere conjecture. On the contrary, it is sustained by an antiquarian record of literal import discovered by a farmer of Monte Video in Brazil in 1827. In one of his fields he discovered a flat stone, upon which, to him, strange and unknown characters were engraven. And beneath this stone he discovered a vault formed by masonry, in which were deposited two ancient swords, a helmet, and shield. This planter caused the flat stone and deposit to be removed to Montevideo, where, in spite of the ravages of more than 2,000 years, Greek words were easily made out, which, being translated, were as follows. During the dominion of Alexander, the son of Philip, king of Macedon, in the 63rd Olympiad, Ptolemus. Now, on the account of ravages of time, it was impossible to decipher the rest, but on the handle of one of the swords was the portrait of a man, supposed to represent Alexander himself. On the helmet there was sculptured work, executed with the most exquisite skill, representing Achilles dragging the corpse of Hector around the walls of Troy. From this discovery it is evident that the soil of Brazil was formerly broken by Ptolemaios, more than 1,000 years before the discovery of Columbus. But in North America, with which we are more familiar, we conceive the evidence of a Roman and Grecian population to be equally conclusive. On the bank of the river Desperes in Missouri was found an Indian and presented to Governor Clark a genuine Roman coin. A Persian coin was also found on the bank of the Ohio River. Now, we are not, however, of the opinion that the Romans or Grecians inhabited either singly or jointly at any era, this entire continent. See what they say in there? They don't want to agree on it entirely. It's too much for them at this time, right? But that Asia, Africa, and Europe have each contributed to swell the population of the Western continent at different eras. Okay? At different eras. But you got to remember, there was an original already here. So even though this land was, there was a swell of population and influx into this nation because of its greatness, its notoriety as being the originating place where the sages and magi would come together to formulate and recorrect the calendar. These things are important in our historical record because they were already known, and these are things that have been forgotten in time. Some of our reasons for entertaining this idea arise out of the great similarity existing between the tumulus ruins of those several continents. Many enclosures, and you hear how they say the similarity between the existing tumuli ruins. Well, if you look at it, who has the oldest of those? Who has the oldest of those? The most rudest structures of them all. It's definitely America. Even though advanced, still yet the rudest. The precursor. Many enclosures similar to the Roman camps described by Josephus may yet be seen in the valley of the Mississippi. He represents those camps as being 4 square by measure, adorned with towers at equal distances, with gates or palaces of entrance on every side. And we've gone through this when we've shown the structures in the Huehue Tlapalan books and everything that we've been going through. At Marietta, in Ohio, may yet be seen the remains of one of those camps, with its elevated squares at each corner, more than 100 feet square and 9 feet high, and various other earthworks similar in construction may be seen north to the lakes and west to the Mississippi, west of which we doubt whether the Romans ever held empire. The same historian also tells us that the Danes and Saxons reared their military works in circular form. This fact, let's repeat that again. The same historian also tells us that the Danes and the Saxons, sons of Isaac, reared their military works in circular form. The same as our supposed mound builders, our Hopewell, our Adena. But who was it truly in fact? This fact admitted, we have at various points along the Ohio and Scioto rivers the works of both, sometimes isolated and sometimes in union. Notwithstanding the circular and square enclosures chiefly abound, there are, nevertheless, many large enclosures that are neither round nor square. This fact would seem to be indicative of a still further distinction in nationality, such as the recognized in the earthwork of Central Africa, enclosing villages and cities. That those structures have not originated with the present Indian tribes or their ancestors is abundantly evident in the fact that they never have used them either as enclosures or places of defense, nor are they recognized as such in their traditions. Now, why do people get upset with me when I speak on primary accounts, first-hand accounts, people going out and doing the research and knowledge and speaking with the tribes and people and knowing that these people who have migrated now into this region, who are not the creators of these earthworks, who are not the descendants of these earthworks, how does the conjecture come upon us in our modern day and age to believe that that is the case, when in fact all we have to do is look to find out that they don't even own the land in which these structures are on? That's a big key. Let's continue. Composed as they are of materials imperishable, as the base upon which they rest, they continually present to view in form, magnitude, and structure so singular in appearance that they could not possibly fail to attract attention and elicit inquiry from the most thoughtless of human beings. Now, when they speak of the aspect of composed as they are of materials imperishable, as the base upon which they rest, like, you got to understand the technology here is one of rammed earth, geopolymer. That aspect of creating forms, compacting the soil to create the stone. A lot of people think we was out here just always carving and stuff, but that's not always the case, y'all. And as it is well known to all familiar with the North American Indian character, that there are none in the family of man that retain a more sacred reverence for ancient nationality, So it is utterly impossible that they could ever, under such circumstances, have lost the sight of the use and their origin. That point is so big, y'all. Like, there is no bigger point that I can put across than that. So, again, and it is well known, even to this day, y'all, to all familiar with the North American Indian character, that there are none in the family of men that retain a more sacred reverence for ancient nationality. It is utterly impossible that they ever could, under such circumstances, have lost the sight of their use and origin. And that to me hits very, very hard because let's put some things into perspective here for me and myself, and maybe some of y'all can follow and comment and let me know, what I'm thinking if I'm wrong. Now we have a lot of our people coming out and saying, well, we the Indians, and invalidating any people that are, coming here and saying that they the American Indians. And to me, when I think of American Indian, I think of someone who comes later. I classify an indigenous person as before. Okay. Now you got to think about this. If people are coming out and claiming we the Indians, you can't also claim that you're the indigenous people of the Mound Builder Society, which I don't even like to call Mound Builders no more. I like to reflect it as those who lived upon Huehue Tlapalan. Rafinesque has titled them as Atalans and Kutans. You know, Godfrey Higgins goes as far to say that they are the Hebrews, the lost, the 12 tribes, and that they migrated south to become later the Olmecs and the Toltecs and the various tribes, and then became greater into the Aztecs and the Mayans, and just continued to develop as they migrated south. So with me, I get confused on trying to say, oh, well, we're the Native American Indians. But at the same time, everybody knows that the Native American Indian character, that there are none in the family of man that retain a more sacred reverence for ancient nationality, and it is utterly impossible that they could, under such circumstances, have lost sight of their use and origin if we're talking about these structures. It's just not possible. So there's a clear distinction, and we have to quit just like generalizing. Curl Mayo tells me that a lot. You got to quit generalizing, and that's a big key. So, the circular works of the Danes and Saxons, so frequently found in England in connection with the Pentagon or Doomring of Denmark, stretching in a continuous line from Brownsville in Pennsylvania through Wisconsin, Canada, Greenland, and Iceland to Sweden direct, we conceive to be strong evidence of the migration of the Danes, Belgians, or Saxons at some unknown era in time. Now, the only thing is which migration from America out, which would be my most logical thing. If you had the 12 tribes of Israel condensed with all separate aspects of individuality, and some aspects of architecture is built differently, you have migrations and you have a spread out. This spread out would consist of people going over, okay, clearly to England and building different, and then spreading from there further and further. I mean, it just makes sense to me. There are, let me see. Yeah, in a continuous line. Because at this time, England and all of everything over there was like little islands. It was stretched out. It was just islands. So there are other corroborating circumstances that go to prove the correctness of this presumption. First, we find no corresponding earthworks south of Pennsylvania. And secondly, this is at their time, we observe a much greater variety in the physical formation of the aborigines of the North than is seen in the same race in the South. This we conceive to be indicative of international amalgamation between distinct races, and one quality of that distinction carries with it the general outlines of the Anglo-Saxon family, while the characteristics, form, and feature of the Asiatic Tartar is universally preserved in all the tribes of the South. Now, should we be so suddenly transported to the desert of Libya in Africa, and should we there behold in the dense forest a massive temple, with trace of no human existence within 1,000 miles of its location, with towering spires bearing a cross, surrounded by urns? Or should it even be found among savage nations that were utterly ignorant of its primitive design? What would be our conclusion as to its origin and use? Would we not recognize in such a structure the crucifixion of Christ, and attribute its origin to the hands of his followers and worshippers? We certainly should. And why? Because the cross is the symbolic representation of that crucifixion. Yes, with one accord, without a dissenting voice, we would attribute the origin of this temple to the Christian church. Then we find on the shore of the Monongahela, or the highland of the Kickapoo, the identical doom ring of Denmark. Why should we hesitate to ascribe its origin to the ancient Dane? If the Dane, the Roman, and the Persian may not in the early times have made their way to America, it is not rational to conclude that other nations may have done the same. Ancient Egypt, first in science and famous in art, has also left her impress here. In 1775, some of the first settlers in Kentucky, whose curiosity was excited by something remarkable in the arrangement of stones that filled the entrance to a cave, remarked them, and, on entering, discovered a number of mummies preserved by the art of embalming in as great a state of perfection as was known by the ancient Egyptians, 1800 years before Christ, which was about the time that the Israelites were in bondage in Egypt. This custom, it would seem, is purely Egyptian and was practiced in the earliest age of their national existence. You see what we talking about? You see how America predates everything. We predated the most mundane form, rude form of it all, to where it was later advanced and later, or in different eras, in different areas, to where they advanced greater and greater. A custom so peculiarly characteristic of that people being found here in a state of perfection not exceeded by the mother country most evidently leads to the conclusion that a colony from Egypt or some nation of Africa acquainted with the art at some era inhabited that region of country. For a trade of national practice so strong and palpable as is this peculiar art should lead the mind without hesitation to the belief that wherever it was practiced, its authors or their pupils existed. And if the Egyptians may indeed be reckoned among the first nations, as history plainly indicates, if from them was derived the art of navigation and the knowledge of astronomy to a great degree, and the unparalleled invention of letters, with many other arts useful and almost necessary to the very existence of society, it certainly requires no great stretch of imagination to believe the authors of the antiquated works of Kentucky to have been indeed the work of a colony from Egypt. You see where they're still, but even though they're speaking in this aspect, now that we know what we know, we can clearly see that it was the other way around. We can clearly see that it was the other way around. But the antiquarian record of those regions has not left us entirely dependent on this art. The sculptor's chisel and the painter's pencil have also contributed their part to the record history of American antiquity. And something else I want to say too is, like, you think they was just so great in Egypt, and then they came over here to America and was like, we gonna wash down our stuff and we're not gonna be as great. Like, they would get better and better. So it literally only makes sense that we started off in middle America and then expanded to where everybody got greater and greater and greater. Like, they try to put all the Sumerian aspect as before America, and I'm just like, bro, do you not see how amazing the artwork is, if that's even that old? You see what I'm saying? I look at it in the same aspect too, as like, as we move into Central and South America. I feel like, man, it's Our structures here in America are so old and covered with so much geological strata on top that it's just hard to deny their antiquity. So, in a cave or cavern on the northern shore of the Ohio River, about 20 miles below the junction of the Wabash, the interior walls are smooth and covered with paintings and sculptured, grouped in sections and clusters that bear the evident impress of primitive design. On the rocks of Dighton, in Massachusetts, near the sea, have been discovered Phoenician letters, legibly engraved, a strong evidence of the presence of Phoenicians or their descendants on this continent at some unknown time. On the island of Malta, in the Mediterranean, we learn from various historians the Phoenicians once held dominion and were in the habit of depositing their dead in caves. Near the junction of the Illinois River with the Mississippi, we discovered and entered one of those Phoenician depositories containing a mass of dust resembling the decomposition of animal matter, equal to the remains of thousands. And in various earthworks of the West, we also find in deposit the murex shell, a seashell fish from which the ancients procured the famous Tyrian purple dye used in coloring the royal robes of kings. Now, this right here is so important because it's like not knowing though exactly where, how I haven't studied this, but it that is a good point. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to go deeper and make some conjecture. This shell is known to have been highly esteemed by the Hindus and is used by the Brahmins as the musical instrument of their gods. Amazing. Thus, in the bosom of the turf-clad mound, in the hidden caverns of the earth, in the remains of the soil, in the customs of nations buried in time, aided by art and science, by the sculptor's chisel and painter's pencil, we are enabled to trace, amid the gloom of barbarian rule, the ancient existence of the Roman, the Grecian, the Persian, the Egyptian, the Phoenician, the Dane, and the Hindu. Do you hear him? Do you hear him? Let's see it here. Let's really understand what is being said here. Thus, in the bosom of the turf-clad mounds in America, in the hidden caverns of America, in the remains of the soil of America, in the customs of nations buried in time in America, aided by the art and science of America, by the American's chisel and American painter's pencil, we are enabled to trace amid the gloom of barbarian rule here in America the ancient existence of the Roman, the Grecian, the Persian, the Egyptian, the Phoenician, the Dane, and the Hindu. This continent, situated as it is, embracing almost every habitable climate of the globe, with such an immense amount of fertile soil, susceptible of so dense a population, has been and is destined again to become the great hive of nations. Now let's jump into something else real quick. Illustrated School History of the United States and the adjacent parts of America, from the earliest discoveries to the present time, embracing a full account of the Aborigines, biographical notices of distinguished men, numerous maps, all that good stuff, by G.P. Quackenbos. Okay, 1864, y'all. Now, the Mexicans and Peruvians were no doubt descendants of the earliest settlers of this continent, who, as before described, immigrated to it at so early a period that they still retain the arts known in the East. He's trying to say they come from the East, but they originated it. They went out to the East, and they thinking that like they came from the East. They originally occupied the fertile valleys of our great North American rivers and left them in numerous monuments of their industry and skill. Allured by the more genial climate, or driven out by later immigrants from Asia, dodge a hijack, they afterwards found their way southward and finally settled in the fertile plains of Central America and Peru. Do you hear what's going on? They're really talking about the mound builders, where it all originated, okay? There, leading an agricultural life, they retained their knowledge of art for many generations, while the northern tribes, neglecting tillage and giving themselves up to the chase, sunk deeper and deeper into barbarism. We got different tribes, okay? Not all tribes are the same. There's several different tribes. The 12 tribes. That, such is their history, we have additional proof in the resemblance between the skulls of the ancient mound builders, as found in their burial places, and those of the Mexican Indians, both strikingly different from the skulls of the northern tribes. Again, we know, based on the skulls that we've obtained, that the skulls are different from people who came, Native Americans, and people who made them, indigenous, aborigines, who moved south. They migrated. They migrated. Where did the mound builders go? Everybody, oh, they just disappeared. No, they migrated. Okay? They were before. Everything else y'all talking about that got so splendid and spectacular, y'all. Come on, it's not hard, yo. The national annals of the Mexicans, moreover, state that they originally dwelt in the north. The national annals of the Mexicans, moreover, state that they originally dwelt in the north, whence they commenced migrating in the 6th century under the illustrious emperor Satan. 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 You see what I'm saying here, y'all? There's more going on to the story. You know, people will tell you, oh, well, they went from South America up to the mound builders. Bro, the national annals of the Mexicans, even at this time, in these books, that they are massively populating for education in 1864, already knew what was going down, bro. Let's continue on just a little bit to be a little bit more hard-hitting on them boys, okay? Personal appearance. Description of the Indians. Though the first European settlers observed some points of difference in the appearance of various Indian tribes, yet there was a strong general resemblance between them. They were all distinguished by a bronze or copper color, straight, coarse, black hair, hazel eyes, and high cheekbones. Man, that sounds like my boy Seven Bomar. You know what I'm saying? Their forms were erect, well proportioned, and remarkable for agility rather than strength. Their constant exercise kept them healthy. Deformity was almost unknown among them, and they were exempt from many of the diseases of civilized life. Man, I mean, if that's not very descriptive of, man, yeah. Descriptions of the Indians as they originally appeared have been left by many of the early adventurers, among others by Verrassani, who first saw them on the coast of New Jersey and Staten Island 85 years before the discovery of the Hudson River. He was there visited by an Indian chief whom he describes as arrayed in a robe of deerskins skillfully wrought with embroidery. Embroidery. Skillfully, not rudely, skillfully. His hair was gracefully tied behind, and his neck was adorned with large chains set off with various stones. According to this author, the people generally had regular features, dark, expressive eyes, and long locks, which they dressed with care. Man, I mean, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? How many times have you seen Mayan, Aztec, Egyptian, all of these depictions of people with locks? I ain't seen no Native American with locks. Have you? I swear they got straight black hair. That is very fine. It's not coarse. Okay? Like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. Like, this is what was being taught back in 1864. What happened? Please tell me what happened. If this is the description of what was taught and was general purpose of America's school education. We just read the title. So what's going on? Are you being duped? Do you feel stupid? Do you feel misled? Do you feel as though you have intentionally been given false information? Are you starting now to realize why this false information was given to you? I'm not just talking about swarthy individuals. I'm talking about all people of all shades of brown, yo, from the lightest brown that you can be to the darkest charcoal brown that you can be. It's all brown. The woman. Man, this is crazy, man. But let's read that one more time, okay? According to this author, the people generally had regular features, dark expressive eyes, and long locks, which they dressed with care. The women were attired in ornamented skins. Their hair was tastefully braided and flowered over the breast. The southern Indians wore headdresses of feathers. As the heat increased towards the south, the clothing of the natives became lighter and scantier, and in the warmest regions, much of the body was left bare. Y'all gonna understand here with me soon, man. Y'all gonna understand.